So basically I'm an engineer by trade. So if you're doing some of this stuff, you still have hope, because I also got to make games after all this. Some of the previous projects that I've been working on are Battle Bay. This is a team versus team, a real-time PvP game. If you know the gameplay of the basic kind of wargaming formula, this is kind of the Rovio take on the World of Tanks formula. And if you work at Rovio for a long time, there's a big chance that you work on a slingshot game. So did I. I worked on Angry Birds French. This is a competitive slingshot game. So it's like you compete in score, there's weekly changing content, you progress in leagues, things like that. And this is a good segue to the current thing that I'm working on, and I've been working on for the past 1.5 years. So the puzzle game Angry Birds Match. We like to call it the cutest puzzle game ever. And let's start it off with a short video, just to give you an introduction of what the game is about. So that is kind of a good slice of both what the game is about itself, as well as the marketing material around it. So basically the game is about helping these hatchlings, baby birds, team up their party. There's a big collection element in there. And the core game is basically, in technical terms, is a take on the very classic match 3 formula. The twist is that you have these characters as boosters on the grid and you have direct control over them. We soft launched it November 11th last year and went global just 2 months ago, late August. And yeah, so this is a team working on it. So I guess the message I'm trying to tell here is that mobile teams at Rovio are typically to the small size rather than huge teams. It misses a couple of people actually. Our QA manager, she's originally from Hyderabad. She's not in this picture, but that's a pity. But we do have Hyderabad representation in the team. And I guess one word about teams in general in Rovio, we believe in very autonomous teams. So pretty much everything you see in the game, if you go to the App Store and download it right now, it's something that these people, this team, thought that was worth putting in the game. So autonomous teams, autonomous disciplines. And that's it for the quick introduction. Before we go more in depth into the content, let me just kind of tell you what I'm going to tell you about. So first, I want to give a little bit of background how we came up with this whole idea. So how was this Angry Birds plus puzzle and with these hashtings, why did we do something like that? One of the most common questions I get from colleagues in conferences like this and over a beer or whatever is that, okay, so how do you come up with new concepts? How do you evaluate them? How do you choose which concepts go to production and things like that? Now, I don't have the general answer for that, and I don't think anyone really has. I doubt any process has the answers. However, what I do have is the specific answer for this game, so why we chose to do this one. After that, I'm going to take you through the journey from the very early concepts to right now. So it's about 2 years, a little bit less, so 18 months or something, of development of the game. So what kind of directions we have had along the way and what made us do the choices that we did during it. And finally, just a short zoom out into the industry or even the category of casual puzzle as a whole to kind of give you an overview of what kind of issues we need to deal with or what kind of problems we need to solve in the future. And it's all chronological, should be nice to follow and easy to understand. Let's start with the first one. So how did we come up with the concept? So if we go back to 2015, that was the time we actually released the first of our own puzzle games. We have had a published puzzle game already in 2013 called Choose Cubes. I think it was done by a Korean developer. So we kind of had some genre knowledge, but not really in-depth knowledge, since we hadn't developed one ourselves. So March 2015, Angry Birds Pop came out. It's a couple shooter. And later that year, Nibblers came out in September. And that's a match 3. Very similar in gameplay to the video of Angry Birds Match that you saw. And just think about this for a second. If you scroll your Facebook feed or whatever social media of choice, and you come across these ads for these games, Angry Birds Pop and Nibblers, so which one would you be more inclined to tap on the ad and maybe even download it? I guess it will vary. Some people like the other, some people like the other, but we found out that it was much easier for us to get users for the Angry Birds game. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. But then on the other hand, at the time and even now, we tend to think that you can just put it on the same bus. However, with these two, the case was that we were able to scale up install-wise Pop much better than Nibblers. On the other hand, with Nibblers, we also knew that we had a kind of well-oiled core game in it, and we had lots of content that we already had data for. And late 2015, we already knew Angry Birds movie was on the way, and actually most of us at the office, we saw a preview version of it late 2015. And one thing that caught our attention was these little creatures there. So these were kind of a new set of characters from the movie, these baby birds, hatchlings. And the good thing was that we already saw them kind of gaining traction. Late 2015, we posted this basically just a movie marketing thing where the hatchlings basically sing Christmas songs and wish you happy holidays. And it went quite viral, so we were thinking that, hey, this looks good. And like you already saw the video as well, just kind of evidence of how these little critters are defining cuteness. If you do image search with cute, actually the first thing that will come up is this picture of the hatchling, without any SEO magic that I know of at least. So we thought that maybe there's a business case in this. Let's take the core elements of this game that we know that works, and let's take this novel brand extension of Angry Birds. Maybe there's something good about this. So this is what I was thinking at the time. And that was basically how it came to be. And the next part is, what then? You have an idea, you maybe even have like a target, but it's usually when you're trying to hit that target, it's not the first time that you necessarily hit, even though you might know where your target is. So next I'm going to talk about what kind of directions we took on the way. So as I said, we kind of knew that we wanted to keep the core parts of the hatcheries. And by core part, I mean the puzzle experience, the grid, the mechanics, the puzzles on the grid. So that's where we started. This is from our 80, a very capable person. So first was just a simple scale test. This is Angry Birds movie characters, a little bit simplified on a basically just a grid of nibblers. We also have the opportunity to work with the concept art of the movie. Remember, the movie wasn't out at that time yet. So the next one was, okay, how do we take the design language, how do we take the forms of the movie world and turn it into functional game elements that look good and above all are readable. And what you end up is something like this. So this is a concept picture from January 2016. And if you compare it to what the game ended up looking like, it's pretty much, one could say that most of the business problem solving in terms of the core game was done at that point in January 2016. The picture on the right, that's from a soft launch build about 6 months ago, but the core game hasn't really changed, it seems. And maybe a short word about our kind of team collaboration tool. So when you have a small team, you have the opportunity to not use that much structure, and especially when you're kind of in the early phase of development and things are not so defined, you like to use a lot of physical stuff instead of, for example, like these project management systems. So this was basically our backlog at that time during the first half of 2016. Now, while the programmers were building out the foundation for the core game, the puzzle experience, the designer at that time said to build on paper different options for the metagame. And we knew that we didn't want to go the Nibblers way with the metagame. Now Nibblers was this classic saga map progression. It was a very, very nice implementation, or basically it still exists the game. It was a good implementation of that, but it had all the goods and the bads of a saga map. Easy to see progression, but however, kind of limited in terms of expandability, building an actual economy around it. So some of the reference games that we looked at that time was Cradle of Empires by AWEM. It's this build/puzzle game where you have this Egyptian town or a kingdom, and you basically replay levels over and over again to grow your empire. Another one, Gummy Drop. Gummy Drop is like this mix of saga map, resource collection, building, all bundled in this traveling theme. And finally, what had just came out at that time was the free-to-play mobile version of Fishdom. So Fishdom had this novel create and collect metagame. So you would play levels to gain soft currency, and then you would have these aquariums that you could buy decorations and fish for. And kind of on the background of all this was the notion that we wanted to build something that would enable things like live events, economy depth, constantly fresh experience, seasonalities, things like this, better than just a Saga map. That was kind of the idea. The first direction was an idea that, okay, what if you rebuild the bird sound from the movie, and your hatchlings also dwell there, and you can take your hatchlings with you into the core game, and they work as boosters. The meta part was not prototyped, however, the core part we prototyped quite a lot, and ultimately the reason why we decided to move on with this, when you insert something external to the grid, to a puzzle game, it's very hard to make that work without basically breaking the flow. So we found out that it just wasn't fun enough. It wasn't a meaningful choice for the player to use these hatchling boosters. So that was one of the key reasons we moved on. The next one was much more like the final one, actually. Use these creative decorations and hatchlings. This is very, very Fishdom inspired. A couple of innovations like the contextual menu as well as multiple different areas, but the core was very, at the core it was very like Fishdom. And with this, we noticed in playtests a certain repeating pattern that players, they like the environments, they like the characters, they even like the game, but after the initial tutorial they just didn't engage with the kind of free-form decorative game that we had built for them. So we started thinking that maybe we should do something a little bit more directed. So that's what we did. We took the parts that we had back then and we kind of just made it more directed. And this is how we did it. We basically took sets of these decorations, assigned them to hatchlings, and then you would buy these sets and get the hatchling. So kind of instead of letting the player set their own goal, we forced the goal on the player in the sense. Sometimes that can be good, sometimes that can be bad. And this worked well enough. I mean, there's some problems in this, but I'll tell you later, but this worked well enough that we went to soft launch with it. So in November 2016, about a year ago, we were in soft launch. And I'll make a couple of words about soft launches in general at this point. I think it's a big shift in mindset when your game hits actual audience, actual customers. You are forced, basically, to focus on the first 30 minutes, the first hours, the first days of your game, because all of your users are there. And also, instead of gut and expertise and looking at the market, you start to look at data from your own game. So I guess it's more data, less gut. But still a healthy amount of gut. I mean, I think intuition still plays a part. And I guess in the whole you could see it as passing the torch from a creative designer to a product manager. And even if that's the same person, at least they're kind of changing their hats. And at least with casual puzzle games, and I guess most games, what you usually want to focus on during soft launch is retention. And so did we. Again, look at our team collaboration tools. This was our whiteboard about a week after we had launched it to actual users. We can do like a CSI type enhance to the corner. So that's what actually the product lead came up with, that this is the key things that we need to focus on. Game difficulty, first time user experience, drop of points. And if you think about it, those all are just manifestations of the same thing. When you talk about early retention, you are just trying to solve a funnel optimization problem. And once you have solved that, you have your retention, and it's really hard to change that anymore after that. So that's where we focus. Also, to do all of this, you need to have built kind of a control system. So good example, linear set of levels that everyone plays through as a sequence, like a classical puzzle game. The less control you have, the more difficult this is to measure. If you can have control, and it doesn't hurt the design of your game, you should probably seize it, because, I mean, control is good, it helps you build a measurable funnel like this. And we noticed quite quickly that, well, we didn't have big drop of points that would have come as a surprise, and our game was kind of built well enough that people generally understood what it was about. So what gets left is just the content, so the levels. I'm talking about the levels here. So we found that the most measurable gains in retention we just got from content updates. And you should stop here, you should keep doing it. If you're doing a game where you are, it's like a player versus environment game, where everyone goes through the same content, or even a different content, you should measure the content. That's your kind of, that's where people will spend the time in your game. So, we kind of thought that we had ticked the box in early retention, so it was time to change the contents of the box in the upper right corner of the team room whiteboard. So instead of game difficulty, first-time user experience, and drop of points, we started to focus on things like variety and freshness. And the big message behind those words is that before we were making the game for everyone, trying to get a big chunk of people to stay in the game as long as possible. Now we wanted to explicitly shift our mindset to make the game for those people who have stayed with the game at least 7 days or 14 days or 12 days. So we wouldn't care so much more about the new users, we would care about the people who we know that they like the game. Obviously this doesn't mean that we just disregard the new users altogether, it's just that when we develop features, this is where we want to focus. And by the way, this is actually stolen from the playbook of our friends at Ruoholahti, about 2 kilometers from our office. This is what Supercell uses for Clash Royale deck balancing, variety and freshness. So at this point we knew kind of that for the long term, the system that we had built for soft launch wasn't scalable. There were many reasons, some of them technical, what I have listed here is more like the design reasons or the experience reasons. The code was kind of convoluted, you had to go through many steps to achieve an increment of progress. Also the proof of progress, we had kind of spread it out in many different phases. They were kind of like remnants of the different directions the game had in the game that didn't they didn't make that much sense anymore in its current stage. The in-game economy was kind of, it had the foundations to be something more, but it really wasn't. And finally, we still had there the kind of free-form decoration feature. And we actually left it there so we could measure if people actually use it. And well, they didn't. So we did quite a big overhaul during early this year, a couple of months early this year. And the big direction change was that from creativity we go to collection. So it's not the create your beach game, it's the collect all the characters, collect all the assets game. So that's what we wanted to emphasize. And actually what you can see here in the before and after picture is that we also increased the scale of the characters. So the hashlings are considerably bigger in the version that is online now. So to go through some of the changes we did a tighter core loop, so you no longer bought the decorations. We figured out people don't seem to care about them, so let's just kind of de-emphasize them. We made this one collection view instead of it being spread around the game, so you can visually see at one place, this is how far I am in the game. We implemented things like gacha boxes and expandable inventory of outfits. So there was some actual soft currency things there. The gacha system was something that we talk about a lot that isn't too much for a game like this, but I think it paid off in the end because we've been able to use the same system for all the event reward stuff that we have since also implemented. And finally, we actually removed altogether the sandbox feature. It's kind of like nice closure from the first ever prototype of that meta game. Since that was the core of that game, and now we had come to a conclusion that okay, we don't need it. And I think it's actually also, I want to kind of emphasize this, that too often people just add things to products and don't remove. You can basically pick whichever free-to-play product that has been available for at least 3 or 4 years, and you can kind of observe the bloat. It's always easier to add than to remove. Now we had some nice results from just doing that change, but the real reason kind of was that in order to fulfill that initial promise of keeping the game fresh for years to come having an economy that is really deep and engaging for these players who have been with us for a long time, we now had a product that supported all that. So the summer we spent building kind of a basic live ops tool set, if you will. So depending on who you ask, they have a different opinion of what live ops means, but I guess what I can say here is just that we basically did different envelopes for time box challenges. So the first one was a streak quest. So you will need to complete 5 levels without losing in order to get the reward in time. The second one was kind of a less stressful implementation of the same thing. You will have to beat 15 levels in time to get the reward. And the third one is something that I'm actually a bit proud about because it's kind of something I think we came up ourselves. It's like a treasure hunting bingo hybrid. So basically each level you play, you get a free dig, and you find something every time, but in order to get the chest, you need to find 5 keys that are kind of scattered over the beach. And I think like one of the strengths in our game is the kind of physicality of the environment and kind of tying that physicality together with all the scenes in the time box challenges. I think it's kind of really works to our favor. And so at least that was it for soft launch. Now we are at global launch. If I said that soft launch kind of changes your focus, so does actually global launch. But it's different because soft launch makes you focus on the things in the product that have immediate returns. That's, I guess, how I see it at least. But global launch makes you actually think about, or it forces you to think about all the things around it. The biggest of which is, of course, marketing. All the marketing creatives, delivery, ad networks, all of that kind of enters your reality. And there's also other things like customer support, community management, all of this kind of ties together as one experience. Product-wise, the change is not that big though. And I guess like global launch is, I would like to say that it's like the first steps of a marathon. And the second step of our marathon has been basically implementing support for these seasonal envelopes. And the first of which is Halloween, which was just running a couple of weeks ago. And it got a very nice response from the players. What we did was we basically wrapped our time box challenges into a bigger envelope. So you would have to complete a bunch of these challenges with a duration of about 2 weeks to get bigger chest. Actually, the Halloween chest is there under red bubble. So you would have to complete everything, and then you would get to open the grand prize that is always visible in the seasonal area. And again, I think that the kind of physicality of the environment, it kind of enables us to make these seasonalities in a very believable way, instead of just kind of respinning a matchable or a static sprite of some map. We actually have these living environments. So I would like to say that this was kind of a story of focusing on the right things and doing quick iterations. But let's maybe recap a little bit. So what we actually 2015, late 2015 was the initial concept. The movie was coming out. We knew the hackings were coming. The core visual direction was pretty much there in January. Then we had this decorative meta game, which we made a little bit more directed before going to soft launch. Then what followed was a couple of months of razor-sharp focus into the early experience of the game. And after that we shifted focus to make sure we can actually do this, so enable these live ops tools that we are currently using. Enter global launch, and the biggest feature we've added is the seasonal campaigns. And we are in the now. Finally, the last part of my presentation is just a short zoom out into what kind of trends there are that we need to take into account, that we can update a product that is still relevant in 2020 or even 2018, because things tend to happen fast in this industry. First, marketing a puzzle game, it's tough. Marketing a mobile game is tough, but currently the casual puzzle market is one of the kind of reddest of the red oceans. Each of these competitors here are there with I think triple-digit million budgets. So you need to find creative ways to go around it. Another one more kind of product-related thing is that these kind of mid-core first features like collaborative play, guilds, guild versus guild, things like these, they're kind of slowly creeping into casual. And there are some games that already do it quite well. Maybe the better example even is Township, the picture on the right. They have an actual collaborative team versus team gameplay. That's a builder, Township. In Toon Blast, they're kind of cloned the core functionality of Clash Royale clans. And I guess for that, the jury is still out. They don't have a lot of features yet. But what I can predict for 2018 is that we'll see more of things like this in the casual space, especially in kind of these high retaining casual games that basically focus on IAT monetization. And finally, just kind of a view on how the games still develop and that players develop. Candy Crush has been there for like 6-7 years, I don't even remember. And it's a different game now than it was back then. I just opened this app like a couple of days ago just to get some reference images. And of course you have your retention calendar, but that's everyone has that. But they have some nice monetization tricks there to kind of dwell on your loss aversion. They also have, of course, a streak quest which you actually can't avoid. You have to press OK. And they have a quite elaborate player profile where you can basically see all of your progress vectors, time boxed and total. You can compare yourself to people and things like that. So what I'm saying here is that players are ready for more and more and more. They're no longer the same players that they were when they first were introduced to Candy Crush 6 years ago. And the genre is still evolving. This is from a quite recent blog post by Adam Telfer. And so basically from 2012 there's been kind of many of these innovations on the meta side. And I guess to bring it all to conclusion, time will tell what it will be for 2018, what's going to be there with the question mark, but what I can say is that at least I will promise that we have some horses racing for that. So, to wrap it up, I first told you about how Angry Birds Match concept came about. It was pretty much a business case first. Then I went through all the directions that the product has taken during its journey to global launch. And finally just a glimpse of what's going on in the industry and especially in the casual puzzle category. That's it for my presentation. Feel free to grab me if you find me over there. I'm here still tomorrow. And looking forward to learning more about the Indian gaming market. That's one of my goals for being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mikka. Not just he's available, but if you guys have any questions, you can put it across right now. Any questions? Anyone who's having any questions? Mind?
I have a question.
Looks
like I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, could you please give us more details about the soft launch strategy that we took? I mean, did you target a specific demographic region, or did you send push notifications to a specific set of users? Because you guys are already a big organization, and I mean your user base is pretty high. How do you confine or how do you restrict yourself to, I mean, how do you manage a soft launch as such?
I think the key thing is that you need to have. I would say the key thing is consistency. So in order to measure something that you do, you need to basically have a consistent influx of the same kind of users. So if you look at the historical soft launches we did, we usually launch on markets that are close to our main market in like how they behave. So if our main market, for example, is the US, then we try to soft launch in countries that resemble the target market. And that's one thing. And the other thing is that you need to have enough scale, so you get big enough cohorts that you can actually measure what's going on. I guess those are the two key things.
The mic is there.
I'd like to know from 2015 to 2017, and you're going for a global launch. What is the order of investment you have? And I don't know if it's a private question or
I can't comment on that, but what I basically did say was our team sizes. So usually we don't have very big team sizes. I guess you were saying about product development investment.
Yeah. I mean, what it takes to make it.
So are you talking about in terms of dollar?
Yeah, in terms of dollar.
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on that.
I have a question. You in one of the slides you were talking about the content is king for the first 60 days of launch, right? And I mean, historically and traditionally, how people do is they look at various attributes, not focusing on lot, but to the content in the soft launch. So how do you see that? I mean, what is your take on that?
So can you repeat the question?
The question was more on terms of one of the slides was talking about the content is the key, right? And for the first 60 days of the soft launch, whereas majority of the developers focus on to the various attributes, how the KPIs are working and stuff. So how did that change, or I mean, seems to be is a view?
Yeah. So I don't think those kind of measuring and the content they are not in conflict. I mean, my point is that you need to measure your content, right? So the thing I talked about was that if you have a linear progression in your game, you're basically talking about the funnel, right? So you have 1,000 users entering, and if you have designed a system where they actually go through each individual piece of content, then you know it's a sequence, and you can find like drop-off points there. So that I mean the idea is that if your game is like that, tweaking your content will bring you retention improvements.
Fair enough. Great. A big round of applause.